Hello and welcome back to the roster.
This is John, joined as always by my brother Adam. And
Today we were also joined by a special guest.
Yeah, we're really excited today to be joined by Julian Alonso. Julian was born in Bogota, Colombia, and moved to Queens, New York during his childhood, and then to Manchester, New Hampshire. He was a standout athlete at Manchester Memorial High School, playing running back in a variety of defensive positions, and served as the team captain his senior year in 2009. After attending West Virginia University and the University of Hawaii, Julian served as a graduate assistant coach at Wingate University and UNC Charlotte. In 2015, he founded Audible Football Camp, a nonprofit dedicated to teaching American football outside of the United States. He is now a doctoral candidate at the University of Florida, where he has served as a volunteer assistant coach for 3 seasons. Welcome, Julian, and thanks so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate being here, and that was a great intro, Adam. You really put my name up there, man. Thanks a lot.
Hey, done some great things. And speaking of those great things you've done, a lot of work outside football, which we'll get into, but football itself, like I mentioned, you were born in Bogota. I can imagine that, football, or as we say in America, soccer is probably a bigger thing there than American football. So how did you get into the sport of football?
Yeah, great question. So obviously culturally, my family leans towards football, the soccer version. And so growing up, I didn't have an influence of teaching me American football. My father didn't know the sport. My uncle didn't know the sport. My cousins, nobody knew the sport. And so when I was growing up, it was actually friends that introduced me to American football. It was guys that I lived in the neighborhood with, and they'd asked me to go and play with them. And then eventually asked me to go join one of the Pop Warner teams in the city. And so that kind of sparked my interest in the sport, having those friends. And it quickly grew in me that I was really enjoying the sport kind of more than any other sport.
Was this in New York City?
So in New York City, I was playing all types of sports, but in New York City, American football isn't played like that, because American football, you need a big space, you need area. Which New York City does not have. And so in New York, you play baseball, you play basketball, handball, small court type sports. When I got to Manchester, New Hampshire, which is more rural, there was definitely more opportunity to play American football. And so that's where I got started, was in Manchester, New Hampshire. Matter of fact, it was like my first year moving there, where it was like my first time actually getting an opportunity to play. Because again, in New York City, we didn't have that.
Gotcha.
And so, so it was actually me, the one that went on and introduced it to my family. And I was showing, my mother the sport, and showing my uncle the sport. And they saw it on TV and whatnot. Everybody knew about it, but nobody was into it. And so I was kind of the first one in my family to do that.
Well, so you've created some fans now in your family of the sport?
Yeah, absolutely. My mom's 100% into football. My sister's a huge fan. I think we've evolved from saying we're more American football fans than soccer fans within my immediate family.
Okay.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool conversion there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you were a good player back the day at Manchester, New Hampshire. And you ended up in the coaching ranks, of course, now at Florida. What kind of led you on that path? Were you looking to play in college, and how did you end up on the coaching side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in Manchester, and I wouldn't say I was a great player to that extent. I was a very strong player in my neighborhood and the people I was surrounded in. I had opportunities to go play football in the New England area. And at that time, I had been living in New England for 5-6 years, or like 7 years at the time. And I wanted to experience something than being in New England. So I chose going to West Virginia University. And I got to West Virginia in my first 2 years to go as a preferred walk-on spot. I had been told I could go preferred walk-on spot after my first year. And then, unfortunately, there was a coaching change. One of the coaches that I knew there took a job somewhere else, which kind of left me in a bind my second year, whether I was going to be able to play football at West Virginia or not. And so, football is one of those sports where you kind of have to be in a direct path of continuously playing. Otherwise, if you kind of fall off, it's hard to get back in the playing train again.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what happened to me at West Virginia. Was once I was, done playing and we're hoping to go back, it just unfortunately didn't work out. And so that I decided my third year it was when I was kind of had that mentality change of, okay, well, maybe if playing isn't working out right now, stay involved in the sport, continue seeking opportunities to working in American football. And so I saw coaching as the natural next progression of being within the sport. That's when I reached out to a couple programs. University of Hawaii was a program that I was lucky to be an exchange student, to go out there for a year. And I reached out to the coaching staff, and they gave me an opportunity. And in that first year coaching, and then granted it was at Hawaii, but I had a wonderful experience. I learned so much about coaching, and I also learned that it was something I was really passionate about. And so that really, took off my career of that's what I wanted to do from there on forward.
Nice.
Gotcha.
Hawaii must be a good place to start out.
It definitely was, man. I don't know if I could say the same thing had I been at a school like way up cold, when dark, snowy winter months. But in Hawaii, I mean, we were playing football year round, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And so I wanted to continue doing it from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah, idyllic spot there for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned learning from the coaches you coached under at Hawaii. Could you delve in any more to maybe some specific lessons that you learned from either those coaches or other coaches that you've coached under?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest lesson I learned when I first walked into the football offices and trying to be on the coaching end of it was that I did not know nearly as much about football as I thought I did. Even as a player, when you're playing, you're so concentrated on your one specific position, and then maybe just on your side of the ball if you're playing on offense, defense, or special teams. And so, as a player, you think you know more than you do know. And so when you walk into a coaching office and, we're talking about, scheming against opponent or preparing a practice schedule, those were all foreign ideas to me, as far as I had never done that before. I had always just been a player, and I was always just taught the plays, and I thought, that was to the extent of it. And so what I realized was when everybody compares football to a chess match, it's essentially what it is. It's strategizing, it's preparing for an opponent, knowing what they're going to do and knowing how you're going to react to it. And those are just intricate parts of the coaching world that nobody really sees. People just, some people think that you show up on, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, and just play a game, and then you go home and you show up again next weekend to play a game. Like, the amount of preparation that goes in the back end of it, the behind the scenes of it is just incredible. And it really takes a full staff of, minimum 20 people to run a football team. And yeah, I mean, to me, that was just an incredible perspective that I hadn't seen before. I guess I was just always having the fan perspective of we show up and we play. Nobody gets to see what the coach is doing on the day-to-day.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well said.
For sure. Yeah. It's not something you can easily appreciate from
just my perspective is definitely that.
a fan perspective.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to sort of really understand
or pick up on that from there.
Absolutely.
You mentioned too, kind of working on all the sides of the ball, right?
that defense and special teams and kind of
picking that up. Was there one of those three that
was maybe more of a challenge for you
getting into the coaching? And then also, are there different, unexpected or maybe expected or anything benefits from sort of working on all sides of that that you've found?
Yeah, John, great question. So as a coach, right now we're in an era where coaches are very centralized to one position or one side of the ball. So coach is going to present themselves as, hey, I'm just a quarterback coach, or I'm just an offensive line coach. But you know, some coaches are great coaches, and where they're flexible. You see some resumes where guys are 1 year on defense, next year later they're coaching offense, then all of a sudden they're the special teams coordinator, and they're really well-rounded coaches, and they could get a lot of jobs in different positions in different organizations because of that flexibility they have in their toolkit. And that's the mentality I took on when I got into coaching. You know, I played offense. I was primarily a running back, and then I thought like, hey, I want to just coach offense. But then I had an opportunity for a job to be a defensive coach, and you really don't want to turn down a job just because you limit yourself by saying, hey, I just coach on offense. Like, you also want to be able to go out there and learn on defense, and the coaches will tell you you're going to be a better coach on offense because of your experience you've had on defense, and you know now how a defense is going to scheme up an offense, why the defense is going to, line up certain ways against an offensive look. And so those things just kind of build off in each other as the defense reacts to offense on this and vice versa. And so a coach that's able to understand both sides of the coin is just going to have a greater understanding of the game. Not saying that those specialized coaches don't have those skills, but the perspective is just different if you've had that experience. And so to me, it was kind of understanding that versatility is important, and then understanding that there's going to be a learning curve regardless. And so might as well put yourself on the deep end and try to learn defense or try to learn special teams rather than just being really comfortable in offense. And that perspective I've taken because I've had positions on offense and defense and special teams, and even on like the operations end of it, where you're not working with the team, but you're working on everything that goes around, like how the team should be operating. And so, yeah, that versatility is important for a lot of coaches. I think especially even more now for young coaches who are trying to work their way up the ladder. So guys like me, and yeah, it's part of the game to not know everything. And so you have to be vulnerable enough to say that I don't know and I'm willing to learn.
Gotcha. Yeah, totally. Super cool. Yeah, I think that having that versatility and just like thinking, right, like you're saying, sort of getting into the mind of the other side seems like such a big thing. Or people talk about being like a student of the game. And I think that's a big thing I like associate with that. It's like understanding what's going on in like every facet of it to then bring that. And then, going from
teacher of the game,
There was a game a few years ago. Our dad watches a lot of sports talk shows and listens to a lot of sports talk radio. It was like a Thursday night game. I think the Seahawks were playing maybe the Broncos, and it might not have been the Broncos. They were playing somebody, and it was a pretty big game, kind of late in the year, and it came down to the final drive. And there was some big play at the end, and I just remember some analysts heavily criticizing Pete Carroll and saying that Pete Carroll's never coached defense and doesn't understand what's going on. And he broke down a few plays. He was like, if you look at these previous few plays, he really should have called this. And I don't know why, but like such and such, he would have been able to, score, and he wasn't. Right. And he was heavily critical of Pete Carroll for not understanding what the defense was calling in that situation. I just remember that kind of like opening my eyes to like, oh wow, I guess it really would benefit you to coach, both sides of the ball that way.
Yeah. Like another layer there. Yeah. Yeah. Well, talking about your, coaching and everything as well, Julian, you also then in 2015, you founded the Audible Football Camp.
To start,
about what Audible FC is.
Yeah, absolutely. So we changed it, renamed to Audible Football Corporation because we do more than just football camps. But Audible FC, I started again in 2015. Was our initial camp was our first event ever was in 2015, but the idea had been brewing in me since 2010, because I had coincidentally been in Colombia. I was in Colombia visiting family. I was in the homeland, and I saw a couple guys playing with an American football in one of the local parks. And it was completely mind blowing to me, because at that time I hadn't, intersected football with an international community. And it sparked an interest in me. I met the guys, I stayed in touch with them. And they grew from just being a group of guys that were playing catch, in their local park with just a ball and, homemade flags to play flag football, to they organized their own leagues within different cities. They found equipment, the helmet, shoulder pads, and all that. And it blew my mind how invested they were in the sport. And at the same time, it told me that I was blessed enough to be an opportunity to have these American football resources at my hand. And I wanted to give them an opportunity to kind of develop the sport in their country as well. And, in my country, in Colombia. And so in 2015, it's when we decided to say, it's time to help them out somehow. And we thought doing a summer camp was going to be the best way to do it. And I gathered a little group of friends of mine, and we just said, hey, we'll do a one-time event. We'll go down to Colombia. We'll do a camp for them, and, we'll see how it goes. And we went to the city of Medellin, which is second largest city in Colombia, after the capital, and it was incredible. We had a great turnout. We had over 100 guys, and more that couldn't get into the camp, because we just, over 100 guys. I can't coach him myself, and so we capped it at 100. We did a 3-day event, and it was so impactful for them that by the end of that weekend, all these kids would just nonstop ask, when are you coming back? When are you going to do this again? When are we going to have an opportunity like this again? Right.
Awesome.
We also posted a lot of that on Facebook, and we posted it on social media. And by the time I got home back to the States, I was getting phone calls and direct messages on social media from guys in different countries that saw what we were doing in Colombia, that saw what we had done for that weekend. They were messaging me like, hey, how can we get you to Ecuador? How can we get you to Argentina? How can we get you to Chile? Like, we need something like that. Because in South America, football isn't that big. So if you're an American football community, chances are you know the guys in the country over, because you connected on social media and whatever, and they knew each other. And so the word spread that we had done this, and and the request and the demand for something like us to be done in other countries was just overwhelming. And that's when we decided, like, hey, this can't be a one-time event. We have to continuously go back and work with these different countries, and it took off from there.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That's like super cool, especially to see, like, get that direct feedback of like, oh, this is working, this is great, and like have the demand really drive and sort of present itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it sounds like just the interest, is almost kind of immediate there. Like it picks up really quickly. Were there some like barriers to kind of your work to sort of like spread this and like work in other countries? Like, I imagine that's at least logistically, difficult.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are maybe some of the challenges that come up as part of that as well?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, we have many challenges and many barriers that we try to work around. Some that we've minimized. For example, communication with the teams. In the very beginning, when we set on the mission to help teams grow in different parts of the world, our biggest thing was to find these teams. Like, where are they located? Who's running these camps? Who's running these teams? And so, we forget how organized here in the States we are. As and I say organized in the way of that sports are directly included into the education system. So if you play sports, it's probably because maybe you played in middle school or because you played in high school. And so they're all attached to your local public school.
Mhm.
Outside of the United States, it's not like that. There are not many countries that attach sports to their education. And so what you do is kids sign up to play sports in the local community clubs. Maybe, they're what we would call the YMCA style organizations. They have their clubs there, a centralized community center, and they offer different teams and activities for the kids, right? And since American football was a brand new sport, and it is a brand new sport for a lot of countries, there wasn't an organized establishment for these teams. And so a lot of it were a group of 10, 15, 20 guys that wanted to play in their community, and they created a Facebook page, and they gave themselves a team mascot. And then all of a sudden they're the, whatever Tigers. And I have to go out and find these guys because these are the guys I want to work with. And so one was finding the audience, finding exactly where they're located. How can we get in touch with them? Once we got in touch with them, it was trying to figure out, okay, what is it that you guys need? Where do you want to advance? Where do you want to play the sport, and how do you want to play the sport? Because obviously, American football, the many barriers is that you need a large field. You need a field that's over 120 yards, 54 yards long or wide. You need helmets and shoulder pads, which are very expensive. They're only manufactured in the United States, so you have to buy them here in the United States. Those are going to run you a good $500 for good shoulder pads and helmet. Plus, you gotta export them out. Customs is going to probably double that price for you. And so what would cost
Wow.
a decent amount of money here in the States has now doubled or tripled for a kid that is in a different country.
And just to clarify, that's per helmet and shoulder pad.
One really good helmet could run you $500.
Okay.
If you find a decent helmet and shoulder pads, maybe combined, that could run you around 500 in total also. But we're gonna talk about concussions, and then you want to give them the best equipment. You want to give them equipment that is going to be safe. At Audible Football Camp, or Audible Football Corporation, excuse me, we've equipment donation is part of one of the deals that we do. We've gone, located, and collected equipment here and shipped it out to other countries. But it's not like we have a large budget where we could go out and buy the newest Rydell or shot helmet and whatnot. Like we have to ask for teams to give us their, hand-me-downs of, hey, you guys just finished your season. Do you have any helmets and shoulder pads you want to donate? We'll collect those and we'll send it out. But teams are going to be hesitant on, they have to pass inspection. They have to get refurnished. They have to be, go through an impact test. And if those are cleared, then perhaps you could, have them. But if they're still good helmets, those teams are typically going to want to keep them, right?
Yeah.
And so equipment has always been an issue of how can we find these guys affordable equipment that's usable, and it's not a health hazard, right? And that they can, also continuously get more and more and more equipment into their countries.
Sure, it's a challenge.
Yeah. So that's what has always been a big challenge. That's one of our largest challenges is the equipment. Another large challenge is actually training and coaching the coaches. Because in football, for example, tackling is not a natural human, motion or behavior. Like you have to be taught how to tackle a person, because if you do it the wrong way, you could potentially injure yourself, right? Put your head down, you could tweak your neck, and even as far as like, there's nerves in your neck system, you know what I'm saying? So if you have a coach that's teaching you an improper tackling technique, that's a big issue. And so one of the biggest challenges that we have right now is how do we go out to effectively coach all these coaches so they know the fundamentals of how to tackle a ball carrier, right? How to block a guy, how to catch football, how to throw a football. Those are things that are not, these are movements that are not done in any other sport. These kids are in their homelands, they're playing probably soccer growing up, or maybe basketball or whatever, maybe native sports in their country. But, most of those sports, they're not going to be asking their kids to push another human out of a way. And so we
Right.
have to teach them how to do that, right?
I can
And
imagine
that's
as coaches, they wouldn't have played football either growing up, so
right.
they wouldn't know it themselves.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so we're at a point where we have people that are passionate about the sport. We have, they have their interest in there, and they see it on TV and they try to imitate it, but they just don't know the basics of it, right? And so we have to have a network of training where coaches can come in and get basic understandings of how to develop athletes, how to develop themselves as coaches, so that they could go back to their own communities and do it effectively and do it the right way. That way there's a cycle of teaching of where this is the right way to do it, this is how it's taught, and it's continued, rather than we have a coach that doesn't know what he's doing. He teaches his players the wrong way to do it. His players take up bad habits. Then the players go on to become coaches and continue to teach those bad habits. And that's how injuries occur. That's how kids get disinterested from the sport. So we want to eliminate that by giving coaches the right education.
Yeah.
I can tell you're really passionate about this and doing it the right way. So just thanks for sharing that. It's really cool to hear.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. And just as you're sort of alluding to there already, kind of we mentioned before, we kind of wanted to touch on concussions and sort of head injury in the sport. And just from your perspective now, with years of helping coach and sort of seeing and even working with other people who are learning for the first time and learning how to working to teach people how to play the game in a way that can be safe, but just sort of what do you take of like criticism for football about head injuries, or maybe actions that can be taken in that regard?
Well, first I would like to say that I'm an advocate about the sport, knowing the fact that it's a dangerous sport, right? Knowing the fact that there are going to be health risks for the players that get involved with it, because it is an impact sport. It is a contact sport. Unlike the other sports where, players may not physically come in contact with each other, football is the complete opposite, where you may go a whole game and never touch the ball. But the whole point of your job in that game is to hit other people, right? So understanding that, we want to eliminate and just minimize how much contact the guys are getting, right? Because again, if you have a good coach that teaches you how to tackle, how to block, how to do the things the right way, you can minimize those injuries. If you have a coach that knows to limit how much contact you have per week in practice, because a lot of concussions happen not at game day but at practice. How to minimize the amount of contact that the guys have at practice, so when they come to game day, they're fresh, they're good, they haven't had their body wear and tear down throughout the week, and here they come on game day and they're already beat down. Another big thing that we do, obviously with equipment, you want to give them the best equipment. The technology and equipment has really expanded in the last 10-15 years to pinpoint, how can we minimize concussions by having a better helmet? And the better helmet you have, the less risk. Another thing that has really exploded, especially in the international community, is flag football as an alternative to tackle football, right? With flag football, you get a lot of the same experience of playing football, throwing, catching, running. But instead of the tackle, you pull the flag. And that has been a gateway for inclusivity in the sport. One, because you take away the need for equipment, which is one we've already established that's very expensive. And so if you can't get it, you can't play, right? With flag football, we eliminate that. With flag football, we eliminate the issues with, for example, maybe the strength and size of guys. You no longer have to be, this huge, big, muscular guy to want to play football now. In flag football, we're more accepting of different variety of sizes and people, because now, that short, smaller guys who thought that couldn't play on the tackle team, now they're going to be more willing to do it, right?
I was gonna say for someone like me, that definitely holds a lot more appeal. Someone who'd probably get crushed normally.
And also, and also for the younger people, when you have a 12-year-old, right, in a different country, you have to convince their mom and dad to let them play, right? And you have a 12-year-old, and you're like, damn, how do I convince this 12-year-old's parents to play? When I'm gonna ask them to play against 13, 14, 15-year-olds and tackle football, and the mom and dad are gonna be like, I don't know if I want that. With flag football, we could give them a pathway to introduce them to the sport and say, hey, come out, play flag football with us for a year, 2 years, get introduced to it, get introduced to the ball, how to run, how to catch. And then if you're interested in the tackle, then we could give you the helmets and shoulder pads and then transition you into the tackle game, right? And so it creates kind of like the space of inclusivity where kids can have access to the sport without having to be restricted to playing tackle football. And that's also opened up a lot of opportunities for female flag football teams. Female flag football has increasingly jumped in the last several years because of that there are, don't get me wrong, there are women tackle teams out there, but not every woman is going to be interested in playing tackle, but the flag football is calling their name. And so if you looked at American football in the past, and that has been solely tackle football, it's been very exclusive to just, older male, especially the older, bigger, stronger male. But with flag football, you're now having more inclusive play with youth, with kids of different size, with females, and with kids of different ages. And so flag football is a way to really navigate, the concerns about concussions, about injuries in the sport, and then it allows the kids to develop as athletes. So when they jump into an American football game that's tackle, then they have a better understanding of how things are going to happen.
Gotcha.
Well, yeah, that's cool to hear about flag football. Growing up, I was one of those people who I love football, my favorite sport, but our parents were not keen on us playing football. And man, if we would have had a flag football team, I would have been all over that. But maybe the next generation will have that opportunity here as well.
You could still become a flag football coach, pass it down.
And don't get me wrong, guys, there's leagues out there.
Yeah,
there's leagues starting to form where they're taking this to not just playing like weekend tournaments at local parks. I mean, these guys are traveling throughout the countries and playing flag football tournaments. NFL teams are hosting them in their stadiums. They do have the flag football international tournament. And I think this past year they might have held them in Panama. And IFAF, the International Federation of American Football, they're the ones that organize all that. And so they get flag football teams from all around the world, and they compete, I think, Panama every year, or maybe one year they had gone to Israel and competed in Israel for the flag football championship. Cool. So it's really grown.
Yeah, gotcha.
I talking about flag football just reminds me. I remember one time, I probably played with you just a handful of times back at WVU. But the one time I remember, it might have been one of the first times we were playing. We were playing by those Towers fields there. Yeah. And I was on the opposite team. I think we were playing two-hand touch. And I had known you, but I didn't know how really good you were. And we were having trouble defensively. I remember we were somebody was like, hey, what did you change it up? And somebody said hey, Adam, do you want to take Julian? And I was like, no way. There's no way I can cover that guy. But I forgot how it panned out. I think you guys won a lot too little. But, and that was just two-hand touch. I couldn't imagine trying to tackle you. But that was good times back in the day.
Yeah, those are good times. And again, those times are the flag football gives us an opportunity to play with people that we've never played before, right? And so we made a lot of friends playing flag football together. There's every rec center throughout the whole United States is playing flag football. They have flag football tournaments everywhere, and so everybody loves football, but not everybody gets to play football in the version that we see it as, which is the tackle football. And so flag football is just a great way for us to get that experience of playing football, but in a more inclusive way.
Yeah. I know Neil Brown, the head coach WVU now, has mentioned several times. I've heard different press conferences and stuff, just numbers of football, and I've heard other places too, just the amount of people playing playing tackle football in the United States declining, and his concern about that. But maybe the opposite side of the coin is that, hey, more and more people are playing flag football. Maybe that's another route for people, like you mentioned, to get into the sport.
Absolutely.
Want to shift gears just a little bit here, Julian. When we were together at WVU, was kind of the early to mid 2010s, and shortly thereafter, I think after our time there, Colin Kaepernick started making headlines by taking a knee during the national anthem to raise awareness, bring attention to police brutality and racial inequality in the United States. And he kind of got, a lot of renewed attention last summer in the wake of George Floyd's murder. What are your thoughts about kind of the current state of police brutality and racial inequality in the U.S. today?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. First of all, huge shout outs to a guy like Kaepernick and other guys that go unmentioned, that fight in their arenas, and these are sport figures, so they fight in their own arenas against social justice. Obviously in the United States, we're going through we're going through a large period of what we're hoping is reform, reimagination of how we treat each other as individuals. And so sport is an avenue, or sport is a microcosm of society. What happens in society is going to be seen in the sport world. If there's social injustice in our communities, there's going to be social injustice in our sports teams. And Kaepernick was the guy that stood for that. And there's countless other guys that stand for that. And what organizations like Audible Football Corporation or any other sport affiliated organization in the United States, what they have to do now is really look within themselves to say, how are we within our own organization, how do we have implicit bias? How do we create stereotypes about different groups of people? And how do those stereotypes manifest in what we do in our operations? Once you're able to understand how within your own organization you may have, stereotypes, or you create maybe what we call structural racism. If we're looking at racism or sexism or classism, how do we break down those structures of inequality, right? And so, for example, for us in Audible Football Corporation, what we do is, in part of coaching and giving teams capacity and resources, one of our biggest things is in our mission is social equity. How do we make sure that we're going into, we work internationally, but these issues are global. This isn't just the United States that is going through this. This is a global issue. And so when we go to another country, we look at how do we create equity in this country by what we do. And, it's a small portion of society, but we have, we're a sporting organization. And so we have coaches, and so we have kids that are attracted to it. So in our little space, how are we showing that we're socially equitable, right? And it's by involving programs that are going to include kids that are from lower social classes, including people of all types of genders, making sure people of all types of races are included. And so kind of those small, well, not small in a way, but in those changes and those kind of perspectives of how do we purposely look for inclusivity in our programming, that's going to go on and help kind of break down those structural racisms that have prevailed in sport for a long time. American football is an American sport, right? It's played, and here in my experience growing up here, you're either African American, Black, or you're Caucasian, white, and you play the sport, and that's it, right? We're taught that based on your race, you're supposed to play this sport. Because you're white, you play this sport. Because you're Hispanic, brown, you play this sport, right? we've been told which sports we are told to play based on our race, and on top of that, which positions in each sport you're allowed to play. If you're an African American playing football, chances are you're gonna get put on as a defensive back or as a receiver. But if you're a white guy, you may be the quarterback, because racially, coaches weren't allowing African Americans to be quarterbacks, the leader, the signal caller of a team, because racially they thought that African Americans were not good leaders. They didn't have leadership skills. Those are racial stereotypes that need to get broken down. And that's why we have great African American quarterbacks today, because somebody was willing to be able to change that. And so we have to, with Audible Football Corporation, we're reimagining who gets to play what. And we're breaking down the stereotypes of you have to look a certain way to fill certain positions. And so I think that's the goal for many organizations. Many organizations are going on to hiring the diversity inclusion officers. That's a role that's coming about. And so, yes, we want to develop athletes, but we want to develop character first. And the character part comes from how can we make sure that we're giving everybody equal opportunities to play a sport that they want to play. And that's how we create social equity in Audible Football Corporation. And that's where the sports world has to lead to. It has to lead into, again, organizations need to look at how they've purposely or not by purpose reinforced social inequality, right, or segregation, and break all that down and reconstruct so we have a more equitable society in sport.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, that can be difficult because I think, like you alluded to, you might not even realize you're doing that. I think that's the whole, or one difficulty with, you talked about structural racism, structural sexism, these structural issues, is it might even be something that's like not necessarily on the personal level. It's like the system itself needs to be changed.
Yeah, like I say, it seems like one theme for sure. Yeah, is like things that have been implicit, or even like you're saying, like positions and stuff. I think half the time it's not even so much that like people are explicitly told you can't do this thing. It's almost just that like that's how people see it already, and it's like implied by what's already out there. And so then, like you're saying, analyzing, really like thinking about that stuff, taking something that's implicit and sort of giving word to it explicitly, being like, this is this thing, and then going forward to like address it. That if that's fair, that seems like maybe one theme that's coming out from what you're saying there.
Yeah, absolutely. And another great example, and sometimes it's not implicit. Sometimes it's right there in our face, and we just can't change it. It's called out, it's said, it's mentioned, and we just haven't been able to change it. A great example of that would be the amount of NFL head coaches who are African American compared to those who are white or Caucasian. And it's been recognized for a very long time. They've even put the Rooney Rule in place to try to combat against that racism, that African American coaches are not going to get hired to the best positions simply because of owners are more likely to hire somebody that looks like them, right? And the owners are all white. I think maybe one African American owner in the NFL. And so, even if it's not implicit, it's staring us right in the face. I think we're still a very hesitant society to change.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, that's just so, owners have big pockets, right? And it does unfortunately make sense that most owners would be white because of all the other structural racism in society. It's much less likely for a Black person to be in those positions, to be an owner. So how do you change that?
Exactly.
And,
thinking even a level higher. Exactly. So
I remember I used to walk to the store on Broadway in Frostburg growing up to get sports cards. I like collecting baseball and football cards. And the one time I got this pack of football cards, I was looking through them, and they were old. I liked old cards. I like mostly looking at the uniforms, and I was going through with my dad, and Warren Moon was one of the cards. I remember my dad saying, "Oh wow, he was a great player," and he said he was really important too because he helped break down the stereotype of black players couldn't play quarterback.
Exactly.
And then he said after Warren Moon, people like Doug Williams and all these other black quarterbacks started coming along, but he kind of identified Warren Moon as maybe the first in that respect. And he said, I think Warren Moon even played initially not in the NFL. He played in like the USFL or Canadian Football League or something because no one would take him on initially.
Huh.
It was we had a group this past week. I was talking to a young man who's Filipino, and he's a baseball player, played baseball in high school. And I asked him about positions, just talking to him about playing baseball. And he's from Chicago, but he said he's a Cubs fan. And he said, yeah, like back a few years ago, they had this guy, I forget what his name was, but he was Filipino, and he was a pretty big star. And he was like, yeah, it was just so much fun watching this guy, who's Filipino starring for the Cubs. And I said, oh, wow. Like, and I guess this guy's moved on or retired, isn't that good anymore. I said, is there somebody else you look to now? And he said, nah, can't really name anyone, no one in the major leagues I can look to that's Filipino. And I thought, wow, like there, for better or for worse, are a lot of guys look like me that play Major League Baseball. So yeah, kind of opens your eyes a little bit for sure.
Yeah, and to the like importance of that like representation, that like visibility and stuff too. Sorry.
Absolutely. No, you were gonna say what I said, John. I mean, you said what I said.
Didn't mean to cut off. Yeah.
No, I mean, I could relate to that story because same for me. I mean, I've been around football, like I said, all my life, but I've always seen it as a black and white sport. I've never been in an organization where there are more than 3 Hispanics. I think I would be one and maybe 2 other guys. One was a kicker and the other guy was like, a backup to something. And that's because not enough Hispanics are playing the sport, or because it's not, they're not invited to play the sport, or they don't think they should because it's not in their race to play it, right? And so that idea of just having that 1 or 2 people that look like you and that are there and it's like they represent you. It's like, to me, that guy was Ron Rivera. I got an internship with Carolina Panthers, and he was like dang near the only Hispanic coach in that league. And to me, it was like, well, there's one, and if there's one, there could be 2. You know what I'm saying? And if there's 2, there could be 3, and that's how it grows. And so that representation part is incredibly because it allows you to think that, oh wow, somebody like me can make it to there.
Yeah, he's a dang good coach too. Did a lot of good things with the Washington team last year.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that, and hopefully we can all do what we can, to break down those barriers and create a society where everyone's included in whatever they want to do.
Absolutely.
Maybe to finish things out on a less serious note here, I looked up where you've gone with Audible Football Corporation. So you've been to Colombia, you've been to Ecuador, you've been to Morocco, and then you said you'd been to several European countries. Am I correct in thinking you've been to Germany as part of that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We were in Frankfurt.
Okay. And then were you in the UK at all as well?
Yep. Went through the UK, met several teams there, worked with a couple guys there.
Okay, great. All right. So the way this game is going to work is that I had a little fun doing some research yesterday and looked up some facts that are true about one of these 5 countries. Okay. So Colombia, Ecuador, Morocco, Germany, or the UK. Okay. So John's going to read you these facts, and you are going to guess, or maybe in some cases, what country that applies to.
Okay.
Out of the Audible FC countries so far. All right.
All right.
Yeah. See how you do here, John.
Okay.
It's all you.
All right. So start it off here. In this country, the government has the power to reject unwanted baby names.
based off government structure, I would go with Morocco. Because if my mind serves me well, the other countries are democratic, and this was more of still they have their king, and so it's not as liberal, I want to say.
I was shocked to find this out. It's not Morocco. The source I was using was from 2015, so I'm not sure if this is still the case. But as of 2015, it was Germany.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
really.
And what's even more shocking, so my initial thought would have been like, oh, because of the history of the Nazi party in that country.
Okay.
That was my thought, but that's actually not the case. So there, as of 2015, there was a law in Germany that your name had to be indicative of your gender. And yes, and the government had the power, if you submitted a birth certificate, they could reject that name and say like, nope, you have to name your kid. I don't know what German names are, but like Adam or Cecilia and not Alex, which could go both ways. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's changed, but I'm kind of shocked that was the thing. But and especially in Germany, out of all those countries.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's a great one. Learn something new.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Next one. The world's first postage stamp was created in this country. First postage stamp.
All right. So again, I'm going off of my rationale that the UK had always been the kind of center of trade and colonization, but really global exploration. So anything that has to do with kind of exportation, I guess I'm gonna go with UK here.
Yeah.
Ding 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 ding.
Count the bucket.
Nice.
Absolutely.
All right.
All
Back
right.
up to 500.
Okay, so the next one here. The world's first and second UNESCO World Heritage Sites are located in this country.
Heritages.
Don't ask me what UNESCO stands for because I don't actually know.
United Nations, ESCO.
Yeah.
There you go. Thanks.
I'm gonna go with this is a tough one. Okay, I'm gonna go with Ecuador here because Ecuador has the old indigenous empires, and so those are incredible historical sites.
Boom.
Correct
Got
again.
it.
Yeah.
I like it.
On top of it, there you go.
Yeah. So Quito is the second World Heritage Site, the city of Quito, which I'm sure includes a lot of those ruins or artifacts from indigenous empires. But then the Galapagos Islands are actually the first, which are owned by Ecuador.
There you go. Yeah, that makes sense. Galapagos Island.
Gotcha. All right.
These are great question, guys. I'm learning stuff here.
Yeah, it's
Me too.
this is an educational podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. In another thing to learn, in this country, it is mandatory for public TV and radio stations to play the national anthem daily at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m.
Ooh, the national anthem. Well, I think those times to me coincided with, and again, I'm guessing here, but Muslim prayer is prayed throughout the day. And so I'm guessing maybe in Morocco, they also do the national anthems throughout the day as well. But I'll go with Morocco.
Good logic. But it's not correct. So according to what I saw, it's actually your home country,
Colombia.
Yeah.
Really?
The national anthem. Are you familiar with the Colombian national anthem?
I am, but I don't watch TV because I don't live in Colombia, so
There it is, yeah.
I couldn't tell you what they put on TV there.
Is it
American
TV are probably significantly different there.
But imagine if they did that here in the States, right? They woke us up every morning to the national anthem.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they used to do that. So like there was a time when radio stations and TV stations stopped broadcasting.
You see, there's the end of the broadcast day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think even Dad said
And
like
then like
when
the
he
start
was,
of it.
yeah, when he was a kid, they'd like put the American flag on the TV and play the national anthem, and then it would just like you'd see static if you turn the TV on at night.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Let's just to get off point here real quick, but the idea of tying in sports with patriotism, right? It was something that we've really, here in the United States, we've really put it together as far as like putting the national anthem before the games, every single game, and then having the military displays as putting the flags, putting the soldiers on the field, the flyovers, right? And a lot of that was attributed to how could we get people interested in signing up in the military? And so let's put the military in front of them. And a great way to get a lot of audience was in sporting events. And so that was the militarization of kind of the sports was, and I think a lot of that happened after 9/11 is what really took off of like that patriotism, especially in the sporting arenas.
You're absolutely 100%
Yeah.
correct. And I highly recommend the book, The Heritage, if you haven't read that yet. That goes in depth to exactly what you're just talking about in that book. And The Heritage refers to the author's a guy named Howard Bryant, I believe. And he's worked for ESPN. He's been on NPR a lot. But he calls the heritage Black and I think more broadly non-white athletes in the United States, and kind of their like the history that they bring. And I think he would say like the responsibility they have to not only be athletes, but like work for social change basically. And it's a like fascinating history. And then he also goes into the whole idea of paid patriotism and whatnot. My parents actually got me that for my most recent birthday, but it's a tremendous read if you ever get a chance. The Heritage by Howard Bryant.
Okay, I have to look it up.
Okay.
All right, we'll do two more here.
Yeah, that was a very good side note for sure.
Yeah.
Good to have mentioned. So we're just gonna do two left here. All right. So for this one, although only 19% of the land in this country is arable, 45% of the workforce here is employed in agriculture. So only 19% of the land, but 45% of the workforce.
So Morocco has the Sahara Desert, which takes off a lot of its, like half of its land. It's like less than 3% of the population lives like more than 50% of its land, which interestingly also happens in Colombia too because of the Amazon. But that's, so I'm going to go with Morocco as far as this one.
There you go. You're right on.
Yeah.
If I answer Morocco to all of them, one of them will be right.
You got it.
Nice. All right. And to finish it off here, so 1 out of every 5 butterfly species is found in this country. So a little obscure, but
yeah. Oh yeah. So again, I would say one of the South American countries, right? Because of the Amazon. So either Ecuador or Colombia. I'll go with Colombia.
Right, you are.
You got it.
Colombia it is. There you go.
Nation of butterflies.
The nation of butterflies.
Nice.
Man, you did pretty well there, Julian.
Finished off strong,
I'm impressed.
Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it. That
A
was
lot
fun.
better than I would have done. I have the ease of just sitting and like having all the answers in front of me. But
Thanks for playing with us.
The Germany one was cool. I enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
I learned something there.
Well, cool. Like I said, education for the masses. But,
Yeah, guys.
Thanks for playing along with us there. And thank you so much for joining us. We're almost out of time here, but before you go, just had two quick questions left for you.
Okay.
First being, why is sports important to you?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Well, I think one, I think sport is an art, right? Sport is an art, like musicians are an art, like artists are an art. Poetry is an art, and I think sport sport is something else in our lives that gives us passion. Just like, you know, traveling is another thing for me. I love to travel, and so sport gives us an opportunity to not only create healthy physical habits, right, healthy long life habits, but it also gives us an opportunity to create a community, to create a bond with people around us, to create long-lasting memories, right? And I think the biggest thing it could also do is it can help people grow in their self-esteem, grow self-confidence, grow in their capacities to want to continue to accomplish goals and dreams. And so sport is an avenue to create all those wonderful things. But we just have to remember that playing sport in itself is not going to create those positive social changes. You can't just put a football or soccer ball on a field and expect everybody to run around and kick it, and all of a sudden everything in life is better. Sport is just one of those avenues that if we could combine it with social equity, if we could combine it with community building, if we could combine it with positive youth development, then sport is meant for positive vibes. But sport in itself is nothing but exercise. You have to pair it with other social development aspects, and then we can have what we come to think of those great ideas and mentalities that teaches us, right? And so sport is important in the sense that it gives us an opportunity to better ourselves.
Gotcha.
I'm glad to have people like you that realize that and are using sport as an avenue to better the world. Speaking of which, my last question for you, Julian, is how can listeners support your work at Audible Football Corporation?
Well, we love your support. First thing you can do is go onto our social medias and follow us on social media. So on Twitter and Instagram, that's Audible_FC. And then you can find us on Facebook and LinkedIn, Audible Football Football Corporation. You send me an email if you have any questions at julianalonso@audiblefootballcorporation.com. And you can find us on the website, audiblefootballcorporation.com. And I quickly want to mention why we were named Audible, right? Why Audible Football Corporation is our name was because in football, when a quarterback goes to the line of scrimmage, right, and he has to evaluate what the defense has put in front of him and whether the play that was selected is going to succeed or not based off that recognition, right? He has an opportunity to call an audible, a play that is going to better their chances of success. And so we thought that idea of calling an audible, calling purposeful decision making to increase your chances of success was a great concept that could be applied to many things in life. And so we want our kids to call audibles in their lives to better help their chances of succeeding. And so Audible Football Corporation came to name. And we're looking to, obviously in 2020, we couldn't do many events because of COVID. We actually shut everything down. And then 2021, we're trying to slowly get back into it. But if we're looking for guys to come out and volunteer, guys and girls, women, to go out and volunteer, maybe to potentially go to a country with us to help us organize events. If anybody's passionate about American football or growing the game internationally, we love any help and support they're willing to give us.
Awesome.
Amen.
Well, thanks so much, Julian. I'm glad you mentioned that about the name as well. That's definitely good to know. And all you people go out there and support Julian and his work at Audible FC in whatever way you can. Yeah. Thanks so much for your time today, Julian.
Absolutely.
It's been really, really fun. Really life-giving.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you, John. Thank you, Adam. This is, great catching up with you, Adam. I got to meet you, and great to meet you, John. I hope that this podcast continues to grow because I listened to a couple of episodes, man. You guys are doing awesome stuff.
Appreciate you saying that.
Thanks. Yeah.
All right. Well, from the mountains of Maryland to the banks of the Missouri, thanks to all our listeners from points in between and not in between. Until next time, he's John and I'm Adam. Stay classy, Frostburg.